VCT Americas Stage 1 has concluded, so it's time to rank all of these teams after the stage has ended. We've gone through the playoff bracket, we know all three teams that are heading to Toronto, but how does each team stack up against each other? For those that don't know, I do weekly power rankings during Stage 1, I'll be doing the same for Stage 2, so this is based off of the most recent performances and all that stuff, so let's get right into it. So this is the board we have today. Just like the other power rankings, I will be starting from the bottom to the top, and we'll be getting through the bottom four pretty quickly because those are the teams that did not make it to playoffs, which means staying at number 12 spot from before playoffs, we have Furia. Furia had a really rough stage one. They looked like easily the worst team in the entire region. Didn't get a single win. I haven't heard of any roster changes coming yet, but there are teams that we've already heard about that are making roster changes, so we'll see if Furia ends up being one of them. I'm sure they're going to be looking at some of the players that were dropped by Loud. Maybe they pick up a 2Es or something like that. We'll see where this goes, but for now, this team is the worst team in the entire region. Moving on to the number 11 spot, we have 2Game. So 2Game does have some hope for stage 2. They are getting their player Spike back into the roster. He's going to be old enough to be able to play in the VCT. He was too young before, and he was their best player during Ascension. So that definitely is going to be an upgrade on what they have now. I think the question is which player ends up swapping out. Maybe it's PXS, the player that came in when Zap was dropped. We will see how that goes. But for now, number 11 spot, no surprise there, no change. Moving on to the number 10 spot, same place as before playoffs, of course, we have Loud. So Loud is apparently making some roster changes as well as changes to their coach. They have now fired their coach. They're also apparently getting rid of Digizin and also letting 2Es explore his options. They officially let go of Vinny, which isn't really too surprising. He had a very rough stage one, which was weird because his kickoff was actually pretty good. So a lot of turnover at this Brazilian team that did have some at least pretty high expectations heading into stage one. After having a pretty strong kickoff, it was at least hoped by the fan base of this team that this team would be able to put something together. They didn't get a single win during the stage. I don't think they necessarily needed to blow up their roster. I think keeping Digizin would have been a good idea. He is at times inconsistent, but is still a supremely talented player. Plus with 2Es, I know his performance has also been up and down, but he is still a pretty good player. He's been a good player on Loud for a long time. So we'll see what ends up happening for this roster and what they end up looking like for stage 2. They're going to, at least they have a decent amount of time to get some new players. They have about 3 months. So we'll see who they end up getting to surround players like Luke Show, who was amazing during stage 1, basically keeping them in a lot of games that were close. So I don't know if this team just doesn't seem like it's going to do much of anything. I think at this point it's just kind of go next for next year. Moving on to another team that is blowing up its roster, we have Leviton staying at number 9. So Leviton are apparently dropping Demon 1 and Rossi. We don't really know for sure yet who the replacements are going to be. Of course, there are rumors here and there, but I don't think this team is really going to be able to put something together to make it to playoffs in stage 2. They honestly probably should have been in that playoff bracket over Energy, but they weren't able to get the win over them. So I do understand the organization making changes. I think there was some talent on that stage 1 roster. It just wasn't put together properly. I do feel bad for Rossi for getting dropped from, I think, his 3rd team within a calendar year. That really sucks. I don't really think he was who needed to go, but I think they already had a decent IGL in Kane, so I think it's fair. And for Demon 1, it's the 2nd team he's been dropped from in a calendar year, so it's just kind of all very unfortunate for those players. I thought Demon 1 looked okay during stage 1, but again, I understand the move. It just makes me think that they really shouldn't have dropped in a tank. Not that he's a phenomenal player or anything, but he should have at least gotten more opportunity on this roster. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. We'll see what this team does. So now we're getting into the top 8, so these are playoff teams from here on out, and starting at the same spot as they were before playoffs, we have Energy. Energy barely squeak into playoffs and then have a disaster game against 100 Thieves. They ended up getting bodied by 100 Thieves, a team that they were able to beat early in the year, but this team just ended up looking like the same team that we saw struggle immensely during stage 1. So much like some of the teams below them, they are also making roster changes. Apparently, FNS is probably not going to be a part of this team going forward, which begs the question, is Ethan gonna stay? Is Som gonna stay especially? There's a rumor that Scuba may be coming in, which would make sense if they bring back Von Carr, because they also need a new coach because now Mike's is off the team. I do feel bad for Mike's, but when they brought him in, I was just like, I don't really think it's going to turn their season around. He didn't do a great job on 100 Thieves when he was the head coach, had a pretty bad record with them, so I didn't think he was necessarily the answer. But now the question becomes, if they drop FNS, then who is the new IGL? I think there are some decent candidates out there in, say, Tier 2, but who are they going to be able to get? Maybe Nismo is available, but they're already taking Scuba from Cubit Academy, so Does Keeper want to give them 2 players? My guess is probably not, but of course they usually leave it up to the player's choice, so we'll see what they end up doing there. I don't think Ethan or Brock should be the IGLs. It is one of the rumors that one of those players would pick up the IGL position, or they maybe just not run with like a traditional calling system. We know how it went the last time Ethan was IGL on this energy team. I don't think they should go through that again. I don't know about Brock. Maybe he ends up being a good IGL, but I just don't see that for him. But we'll see what ends up happening. This team either might circle back to the coach that they dropped very early in the year in Bonkar, or they go to their 3rd coach within 1 season, which would just be insane. The way that this team manages their roster infuriates me greatly. But we'll talk about that at a different time. It's time to move on. Moving on to the number 7 spot, we have a team dropping 3 spots from where they were before playoffs. C9 just do the same thing they always do. C9 always have a really strong stage 1, and then they get to playoffs and then they just can't do anything. They didn't win a single map during the 2 matches that they played. The first one against Sentinels, a team that they were favored against. I did not personally pick C9 to win that one. I thought Sentinels were going to win. I was right. Then they get knocked down to lower bracket. They still have a chance to at least make a decent run, but then they lose to Evil Geniuses, a team that, again, they were favored against. That kind of performance is why I did not put C9 in the top 3 during the group stage. Yes, the group stage is not playoffs, and I do my rankings based off of how teams are playing most recently, so maybe there were a couple weeks in there that I could have put this team in the top 3 and have it be justified, but I just kept thinking, it's gonna happen again, isn't it? Especially because of the fact that I looked at their record and yeah, they did have some pretty good wins and they made some games against really good teams close, but they didn't beat any of those good teams. Even though the perception of C9 is that during 2025, aside from the playoff bracket, they have done quite well, but if you actually look at the record, who have they beat that's a really strong team? They beat Energy, they beat Furia, 2 teams that are both below them on the power rankings and teams that have had terrible years. They weren't able to beat G2 or MIBR or Sentinels or even Evil Geniuses. This team has not proven to me personally that they deserve to be a top team in the region because the years always go exactly the same for them. We'll see if they can bounce back during stage 2. There is a chance that they can make the champions, but I am definitely not putting my money on it. Moving on to the number 6 spot, down 1 spot from where they were before playoffs, we have Crew. Honestly, Crew kind of have a similar issue that C9 does. In stage 1 in 2024, they were the top seed in their group that actually included C9, so they're actually better than C9. But then in playoffs, they fell short, and the same exact thing happened this time. Again, they were the top team in their group. They play 2 matches in playoffs. They don't even win a single map. So while I do think this Crew roster is quite good, they do have similar problems when it comes to these high pressure situations. But people don't talk about it as much because they do usually rally in the later part of the year and make it to champions. I think it would have been much better for them this year if they were able to make at least 2 out of the 3 internationals, but they weren't able to do it. I will give them a bit of benefit of the doubt that they did have some matchups that ended up being pretty unfavorable for them. Being up against MIBR in the upper bracket to qualify for Toronto, very tough matchup. MIBR has already beat Crew this year and they've only gotten better. And then they went down to the lower bracket against Evil Geniuses, a team that they lost to earlier in the stage. And I guess EG is just a bad matchup for this team. They were calling circles around Crew. So in all likelihood, this team is going to be able to bounce back and make it to champions. Again, they usually do. They've made it to every single champions that has happened so far, but is this a year where that trend breaks? Moving on to the number 5 spot, moving up 2 spots from where they were before playoffs, we have 100 Thieves. So by and large, I do think Crew is probably a better team from 100 Thieves, especially since we saw them up against each other during the group stage and Crew won that one. But again, I do it based off of recent performances, and 100 Thieves, they did get a win in playoffs. They lose 2-0 to MIBR. That's a very good team. I expected them to lose that one. They moved down to lower bracket. They were up against Energy, a fairly weak team, and they destroyed them. And then they went up against G2, a team that basically no one gave 100 Thieves a chance against, but then they actually ended up making it a very close game. They did blow a lead on map 3. They did get to 11 rounds. I believe there was a scoreline of 11-6 at one point. Yes, there are maybe going to be things that people bring up like the Vi's ultimate glitch that EU happened with, and my response to that is, yes, that glitch happened, that was bad, but also, why was he so close to the edge of the Vi's ult? Honestly, he probably should have paid a bit more attention to his mini-map there, but I digress. I also don't think that the whole game was decided by that one round, so I don't think we should focus on it too much. But overall, 100 Thieves did play well against G2. They brought that game to overtime. However, did that performance make me have a lot more faith in 100 Thieves? Not really. I do expect them to drop when stage 2 gets going. They're only at the number 5 spot because both C9 and Crew dropped. And out of those 3 teams, they were the only team that got a win and made one of their losses quite close. We'll see how they do in stage 2. I don't think they're going to make a roster change. That's probably an off-season thing for them. But to me, I I think staying with basically the same roster as last year, just swapping out Bang for Xander, I don't think this team is as good as they were in 2024, and I didn't really think that they were fantastic last year either, despite making it an international. Moving on to the number 4 spot, moving up 2 spots from where they were before playoffs, we have Evil Geniuses. Probably the team that I was impressed with the most during playoffs. I did have a decent amount of faith in this team. While yes, there were some games during the group stage where they got destroyed, like their game against Sentinels, they ended up being the last team that qualified in their group, partly because they won games against 2Game and Loud, but the big win during the group stage that qualified them for playoffs was that win against Crew. That was seen as a very big upset at the time, and then they end up entering playoffs in the lower bracket, but then they ended up having a very good run in this playoff bracket and ended up placing 4th. No, that's not exactly why they're 4th. I try not to do these based off of the standings, but sometimes just kind of ends up that way. But this team was really impressive and genuinely could have been the team to make it to Toronto. And if they had done it against G2, the most dominant team in the entire region, that would have been huge. Potter's coaching is really getting through recently. She's showing why she is one of the best coaches in the entire VCT. She's taken underdog teams to great heights before. There's a chance that she can do it again. Unfortunate for them that they didn't make it, but they had some pretty impressive wins. They beat C9, they beat Crew, and then they took a map off of G2 and made that 3rd map very close. So I think that this team has nothing but things to be proud of. I do think the future is bright for this roster. They're missing out on Toronto, but they can definitely make it to champions. They've racked up some champions points during the group stage and the playoffs, so that's good for them. We'll see how far this team can end up taking it, but never underestimate Potter. Also, Ye finally finding his 2022 form again. It was so amazing to see. He was hitting some amazing shots. His confidence is finally back. We'll see if El Diablo is here to stay. Moving on to the number 3 spot, down 1 spot from where they were before playoffs, we have MIBR. MIBR were at the number 2 spot for most of the group stage, didn't really have too much of a reason to knock them down. They had a 4-1 record, only losing to G2, and then in playoffs they qualified for Toronto pretty quickly into pretty decisive victories, beating 100 Thieves, getting their revenge from kickoff, and then beating Crew, a team they've been able to beat this year. Unfortunately for them, when they got to that top 3 spot, they couldn't do much after that. They lost against Sentinels, pretty decisive win for Sentinels there, and then against G2 they did win a map, and there was a close map in there as well, but they still lost 3-1. I don't think the focus for this team was to win the entire Americas. Of course they wanted to, every team wanted to, but I think more importantly for this team, it's that steady continued improvement, and now they're in their first international in organizational history. There are 4 players that are playing in their first international VCT tournament. It's going to be a big test for this team. How are they going to fare against teams at the international level, against teams that they have not played yet? Whether it goes poorly for them or well for them, it's going to be huge experience for those rookie players. I think they have a pretty good chance at doing pretty well during it, but they have to fight their way through the Swiss stage, and that's not going to be easy. Moving on to the number 2 spot, we have a team moving up 1 spot from where they were before playoffs, and that is Sentinels. So Sentinels don't end up winning stage 1. They got very close. They qualified for Toronto by beating G2. They started the bracket off by winning against C9, a team that typically does choke. Then they went on to face MIBR in the upper final. They win that one pretty decisively. And then they get to the grand final versus G2. They have double map ban, but they don't end up getting the win. So while they were the first team in the region to take down G2, they could not keep them down for very long. They still played quite well in that grand final. Zekrom was really hitting his stride during the playoff bracket. Narrate as well was making some clutch plays. He's looked really good during stage 1. John QT as well. There still are a lot of positives in this team. They just aren't the regional juggernaut that they were a year prior, at least at the beginning of 2024. At this point, this team still kind of has a chip on their shoulder. They ended up qualifying for Toronto after being doubted during the group stage, saying that all the wins they got were against teams that were bad, but they still had a 4-1 record. I still thought they were pretty dangerous, and here we are. They end up being one of the 3 teams that make it to Toronto, so this team is going to look for some revenge at the international level. They had a pretty rough run at Bangkok. They're going to want to have that not repeat itself, and I don't think it's going to. This team is quite good. I think they're going to be very ready for Toronto and probably go on a pretty deep run. We'll see what ends up happening, but for now, this team is looking pretty strong. And of course, moving on to the number 1 spot, staying the same place as they have been for every single power rankings, we have G2. So for those that don't know, during the week after the matches happen, I update the power rankings daily. I move it around after each match, and then how it looks at the end of the week is what you guys see each week. And G2 did end up moving below the number 1 spot after they lost to Sentinels. They essentially just swapped places. Sentinels were number 3 at the time, G2 was number 1, so it was just G2 were 3, Sentinels were 1. So then G2 had to fight their way back in that playoff bracket for me to move them back up to their rightful spot. And they ended up doing that. They beat the 2nd place team in MIBR. They had the very close game against EG and 100 Thieves. Definitely way too close for comfort if you're a fan of this team. I was hoping this team would make it to Toronto because they have a Canadian, and I'm Canadian. I wanted Joe to be there, and I do want to see this team at every international tournament because they look very good. So they had some really scary moments during that playoffs. it was not as smooth as they would have wanted it to be. They wanted to beat Sen in that opening match to qualify for Toronto and not have to worry about that for the rest of the bracket. They really had to fight for it, and there were some rough moments during both games against 100 Thieves and EG, but they end up avoiding that disaster, avoiding those upsets, and then end up winning the whole thing. I think it's good for this team to go through a bit of adversity in their own region. I think they cannot get too comfortable. This is a team that has been together for a long time. They've been through the worst of times and the best of times. So this team needs to be reminded that even though they are looking like the best team in the region by a pretty good margin, there are teams that can beat them. They can be taken down on any day against any team. So they have to remember that, and this bracket was a reminder. But they're still in Toronto. They're still the best team in the region. I don't think there's a ton to be worried about against this team. I know the Tahoe nerf is going to affect them in some way, but this team has been good in different metas before, so I think that they're going to find their way around it, especially with the map pool changes. I think Sunset coming in is going to be very beneficial to them. We will see how far this team can take it and if they can get their Bangkok revenge and win Toronto. They don't have to worry about T1 because they're not in Toronto. So that is everything that I have to talk about today. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of this video? What do you think of these rankings? How would you rank each team? Which team do you think is going to do the best at Toronto? Let me know all that and more in the comments below. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.